Alara spent 3 weeks gaining Dr. Anya's trust. It started with small things, opening up more in their sessions, showing progress in her treatment, asking thoughtful questions about the doctor's methods. She studied every detail of the woman who would become her new vessel, the slight accent that colored her words, the way she held her pen during sessions, how she touched her wedding ring when deep in thought. The doctor was lonely, Alara realized. Despite her professional success, there was a sadness that lingered in her eyes, a hunger for connection that made her vulnerable. So Alara gave her what she craved: understanding, appreciation, the illusion of friendship. "You've helped me so much," Alara told her during one session, voice soft with manufactured gratitude. "Sometimes I feel like you're the only one who really sees me." Dr. Anya's professional mask slipped, just for a moment, revealing a flash of pleased surprise. "I'm glad you feel that way, Alara. Trust is essential to the healing process." Trust. The word tasted like ashes in Alara's mouth. The plan came together on a rainy Tuesday in October. Dr. Anya had scheduled their session for 7 p.m., unusual, but the doctor had a conference that morning. The timing was perfect. The night shift would be starting, the day staff leaving. The security cameras in this section of the building had a 3-minute blind spot during shift change, something Caspian had discovered during his own explorations. Alara prepared carefully. She'd been palming her medications for days, building up a stock. When crushed and combined, they would create a sedative strong enough to keep her original body compliant once Dr. Anya was trapped inside it. At 6:55 p.m., she sat in the familiar leather chair in Dr. Anya's office, watching rain streak down the Gothic windows. The doctor's degrees hung on the wall behind her desk: medical school, psychiatric certifications, a life's work reduced to framed papers. On the desk, a photo showed Dr. Anya with her husband and teenage daughter at some beach vacation, all smiling. A family Alara would soon claim as her own. The door opened precisely at 7. Dr. Anya entered, elegant as always in her tailored charcoal suit and heels, her dark hair swept up in a professional twist. She smiled warmly at Alara as she took her seat behind the desk. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, reaching for her notepad. Alara's heart hammered in her chest. "Actually, I wanted to show you something I've remembered." Dr. Anya leaned forward, interest piqued. "About your son?" "Yes." Alara's voice cracked perfectly. "But it's hard to talk about. Could you sit next to me, like you did that time when I had the panic attack?" The doctor hesitated only briefly before moving to the chair beside Alara. Such a simple manipulation. Play to her compassion, remind her of a moment of connection, appeal to her desire to help. "Take your time," Dr. Anya said softly. Alara closed her eyes, remembering everything Caspian had taught her about the body swap. Let go of your physical form. Reach out with your consciousness. Feel the electrical patterns of another mind nearby. And then she grabbed Dr. Anya's hand. The world went black. The sensation was like diving into Arctic water, shocking, disorienting, terrifying. For endless seconds, Alara felt herself dissolving, scattering like atoms in space. Then, with violent suddenness, she slammed into new flesh. She opened her eyes, Dr. Anya's eyes, and saw her own body slumped in the chair beside her. The perspective shift was nauseating. Everything felt wrong. The weight of the body, the length of the limbs, the press of unfamiliar clothes against unfamiliar skin. Her original body stirred, Dr. Anya's consciousness awakening within it. Alara didn't waste a second. She grabbed the crushed medications she'd hidden in her pocket and forced them into her former body's mouth, holding her hand over it until Dr. Anya swallowed. The doctor's consciousness fought wildly within Alara's former flesh, eyes wide with terror and confusion. But the medications worked quickly. Within minutes, her movements grew sluggish, her eyes unfocused. "What?" What's happening? Dr. Anya slurred through Alara's lips. Shh, Alara whispered, using the doctor's voice perfectly. Everything's going to be fine. You're just having an episode. I'll take care of you. She pressed the intercom button on the desk. I need assistance in my office. Mrs. Matthews is having a severe dissociative episode. The orderlies arrived quickly, efficiently restraining Alara's original body, as Dr. Anya tried to protest through drugged lips. She took my body. Increase her medications, Alara ordered with Dr. Anya's authority. She's becoming delusional again, believes she's me. She shook her head sadly. We're losing her. She watched as they took her former body away, Dr. Anya's consciousness trapped inside it. The guilt was a distant thing, easily ignored. After all, hadn't the doctor done the same to her? All those months of heavy medications, of being treated like she was crazy, of having her memories suppressed. Now alone in the office, Alara explored her new body. Dr. Anya was an attractive woman, but in a different way than Alara had been. Where Alara's original body had been all youthful curves and grace, this one carried the dignified beauty of middle age. She ran her hands over unfamiliar curves, cataloging the differences. Breasts that had nursed a child, hips that had widened with motherhood, skin that had lost some of its elasticity. But there was strength here too, and a kind of confidence that came with maturity. She opened Dr. Anya's purse, finding her car keys, wallet, phone. A whole life, ready to be claimed. But first, she had to learn it. For the next hour, she went through every drawer in the office, photographing documents, reading files, learning everything she could about the woman whose life she'd just stolen. Then she gathered her things, Dr. Anya's things now, and walked out of Ravencrest's front door. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. She was Dr. Anya Petrov, respected psychiatrist, and she was free. The doctor's silver Volvo was parked in the staff lot. Alara slid behind the wheel, adjusting the seat to account for her new body's different proportions. The key fob had a home address programmed into it. Time to meet her new family. The drive was surreal. Rain pattered against the windshield as she navigated suburban streets, following the GPS to a lovely 2-story colonial in an upscale neighborhood. Lights glowed warmly in the windows. A home. A real home. Not a sterile hospital room. She parked in the driveway, hands shaking slightly as she gathered her things. What if she couldn't pull this off? What if Dr. Anya's husband noticed something wrong? What if... The front door opened, spilling golden light onto the wet driveway. A man stood there, Mark Petrov, the doctor's husband. He was in his late 40s, handsome in a comfortable way, dressed in casual clothes that spoke of an evening at home. "There you are," he called out. "Dinner's getting cold. Sarah's been asking about you." Alara took a deep breath, remembering the slight accent she'd need to maintain. "Sorry, darling. Difficult session ran late." She climbed the porch steps, and before she could prepare herself, Mark pulled her into a kiss. His lips were warm, familiar to this body but foreign to her consciousness. He smelled of cooking spices and some subtle cologne. When he deepened the kiss, she forced herself not to stiffen, made herself return it as Dr. Anya would have. "Gross, Mom! Dad!" A teenage voice broke them apart. Sarah, her new daughter, stood in the hallway, rolling her eyes. "Can you not make out on the porch where everyone can see?" Alara laughed, trying to match Dr. Anya's usual tone. "Sorry, sweetheart. How was school?" "Whatever. I'm finishing my homework." Sarah disappeared upstairs, the picture of teenage indifference. Mark led her to the kitchen, where a pasta dinner waited. Everything felt dreamlike, the domestic normality of it, the easy conversation, the way this body knew exactly where everything was in the kitchen. She found herself studying Mark as they ate, noting how different he was from both David, her real husband, though those memories remained frustratingly blank. And Caspian. Where Caspian was all dangerous beauty and intensity, Mark was steady, gentle. His touches were affectionate without being possessive. His conversation was genuine without any hidden barbs. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made her skin crawl with its wrongness. "You're quiet tonight," he said as they cleaned up after dinner. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," she replied, using the universal excuse of busy professionals everywhere. Later, in the master bathroom, Alara truly confronted her new body for the first time. She stripped off Dr. Anya's expensive clothes and stared at herself in the full-length mirror. The body was softer than her original one, marked by time and childbirth. Stretch marks silvered across the belly and breasts. The skin had lost some of its firmness, especially around the throat and upper arms. But it was still beautiful in its way. A body that had lived, had loved, had created life. She was cataloging every detail when Mark entered the bathroom. Before she could react, his arms slipped around her waist, his lips finding her neck. "The kids are asleep," he murmured against her skin. "And you know what rainy nights do to me." Panic fluttered in her chest. She hadn't prepared for this, hadn't thought through the intimacy she'd need to maintain. But this body responded to him automatically, leaning back against his chest even as her mind recoiled. His hands moved up to cup her breasts, these unfamiliar breasts, and she caught their reflection in the mirror, a loving husband embracing his wife. Except it wasn't his wife. It was her, Alara, trapped in this performance of intimacy. She turned in his arms, kissing him to hide her discomfort. "I'm exhausted tonight," she whispered. "Rain always gives me a headache. Tomorrow?" He smiled understanding, kissed her forehead. "Of course, get some rest." But sleep proved elusive. She lay in the dark beside Mark, listening to his steady breathing, feeling like an intruder in this bed, this life, this body. Her thoughts kept drifting to Caspian. Was he missing her yet? Had he discovered her absence? What would he do when he realized she'd escaped? The next morning brought new challenges. She had to navigate getting Sarah to school, making sure she had the right books and lunch money. Then there was the drive to Ravencrest, where she would face her greatest test, maintaining Dr. Anya's professional persona while dealing with patients and staff who knew the doctor well. Her first stop was the secure ward where her original body was housed. Dr. Anya's consciousness was awake, but groggy from the medications. When Alara entered the room, she saw her own beautiful face contort with recognition and rage. "You!" Dr. Anya tried to sit up, fighting against the restraints. "You stole my body, my life. Tell them. Someone tell them what she did." "Shh," Alara soothed, picking up the medication chart. "You're having delusions again, Mrs. Matthews. Here, these will help you rest." She prepared a syringe of sedatives, something dark and satisfied unfurling in her chest as she approached the bed. "How does it feel, doctor? To be the one receiving the medications? To have no one believe you? To be treated like you're crazy? Please," Dr. Anya begged through Alara's lovely lips. "My family. My daughter." "Don't worry," Alara said as she administered the injection. "I'll take good care of them. Better than you did, I expect. After all." She leaned close, whispering, "I know exactly how it feels to be locked away while someone else lives your life." She watched as the sedatives took hold, as her former face relaxed into unnatural sleep. It should have felt like victory. Instead, she felt hollow. The rest of the day passed in a blur of patient sessions, staff meetings, and paperwork. She had studied Dr. Anya's notes extensively, knew her treatment methods and professional manner. But it was exhausting, maintaining the accent, remembering all the little details of a life that wasn't hers. That evening, she begged off family dinner, claiming work obligations. Instead, she drove to a small park on the outskirts of town and sat in Dr. Anya's car. watching the sun set. She needed to think, to plan. This new life gave her freedom, yes, but it came with complications she hadn't fully considered. Her phone, Dr. Anya's phone, buzzed with a text from Mark. "Missing you. Saved you a plate. Don't work too late." Such a simple message, full of casual love. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had cared about her so simply, so uncomplicatedly? Even Caspian's love had been a dangerous thing, beautiful but sharp-edged. Caspian. Her heart clenched at the thought of him. Would he understand that she had left to protect herself from his growing possessiveness? Or would he see it as betrayal? She could almost see him pacing his room at Ravencrest, those gold-flecked eyes burning with hurt and anger, planning. A tap on the car window made her jump. A police officer stood there, flashlight beam courteous lowered. She rolled down the window, forcing herself to emanate Dr. Anya's professional confidence. "Everything all right, ma'am?" he asked. "Park's closing soon." "Yes, thank you. Just needed a moment of quiet after a long day at the hospital." He nodded sympathetically, noticing her hospital ID. "Drive safe, doctor." She waited until his patrol car disappeared before letting out a shaky breath. She would have to be more careful. One slip, one wrong move, and everything would unravel. The house was quiet when she finally returned home. She found the promised plate of dinner in the microwave, some kind of curry that smelled delicious. Such a thoughtful gesture. It made her feel even more like an imposter. She was eating at the kitchen island when Sarah wandered in, wearing pajamas and looking troubled. "Mom?" the girl said hesitantly. "Can we talk?" Ilara's heart stuttered. Had Sarah noticed something off about her mother's behavior? "Of course, sweetheart." Sarah hopped onto the adjacent stool, fidgeting with her phone. "There's this boy in my chemistry class." Relief flooded through Ilara. Just normal teenage drama. She could handle this. She listened as Sarah talked about the boy, offering what she hoped was appropriately maternal advice. It felt strange, playing mother to this girl who was only 15 years younger than her real age. "Thanks, Mom," Sarah said when she finished. She hesitated, then hugged Ilara quickly before disappearing back upstairs. The hug felt like a knife to the heart. Later, in bed, Mark rolled toward her in his sleep, arm draping heavily across her waist. She lay rigid, overwhelmed by the intimacy of it, by the wrongness of being touched by a man who thought she was his wife. But she couldn't pull away without raising questions. Just before dawn, she slipped out of bed and stood at the bedroom window, watching the sky lighten. In a few hours, she would return to Ravencrest, would see Caspian in group therapy, would have to maintain her professional demeanor while her heart tried to beat its way out of this borrowed chest. But for now, in this quiet moment between night and day, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she'd done. She had stolen a woman's life, imprisoned her in the same way she herself had been imprisoned. She was living a lie so complete it threatened to suffocate her. And somewhere in this body's brain, locked away in memories that weren't hers, was the truth about her past, about the son she couldn't remember, about why her husband had sent her away, about who she really was. The morning brought new challenges. Standing in Dr. Anya's expansive closet, Ilara felt a wave of disgust as she dressed this unfamiliar body. The doctor's taste ran to expensive but conservative clothing, tailored suits in neutral colors, sensible heels, everything designed to project authority rather than attract attention. Ilara missed her own wardrobe, the way clothes had draped perfectly over her younger, firmer body. She caught her reflection as she fastened Dr. Anya's pearl necklace. The face looking back was attractive enough. High cheekbones, intelligent brown eyes, skin that had aged well thanks to expensive creams and treatments. But it wasn't her face. Wasn't her gleaming dark hair and striking green eyes. Wasn't the beauty that had made Caspian look at her like she was the center of his universe. "Mom!" Sarah's voice carried up the stairs. "We're going to be late." The drive to Sarah's school was tense. Ilara was still learning the roots, the rhythms of this borrowed life. She nearly missed a turn, earning a suspicious look from the teenager. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked. "You seem different lately." Ilara forced a smile. "Just stressed about work, sweetheart. Big cases. You know how it is." At Ravencrest, she parked in Dr. Anya's reserved spot and took a moment to prepare herself. She had group therapy to lead this morning, a session that would include Caspian. The thought made her pulse race. The hospital corridors felt different from this side of authority. Orderlies nodded respectfully as she passed. Other doctors consulted her about cases. She had access to areas that had been forbidden before, including the staff lounge where she fixed herself coffee in Dr. Anya's preferred cup. "Dr. Petrov," a nurse approached her. "About the patient in room 217. It took Ilara a moment to realize the nurse meant her original body, where Dr. Anya's consciousness remained trapped. "Yes?" She's becoming more coherent, still insisting she's you, that there's been some kind of body swap. The nurse looked uncomfortable. "Should we adjust her medication, increase the dosage," Ilara said coldly, "and move her to the secure ward? She's clearly experiencing a severe break from reality." The group therapy room was already full when she entered. 12 patients sat in the familiar circle of chairs, including Caspian. Her steps faltered slightly when she saw him. Even in hospital clothes, he was breathtaking. That perfectly disheveled dark hair, those aristocratic features, those eyes that seemed to see straight through any pretense. But he didn't look at her with the same intensity he'd shown Ilara. To him, she was just Dr. Anya, another authority figure to be managed and manipulated. "Good morning, everyone," she said, taking her seat. The accent felt heavy on her tongue. "Today we're discussing coping mechanisms for intrusive thoughts." Throughout the session, she felt Caspian watching her, not with desire or recognition, but with something else. Calculation, maybe. Several times he spoke up, his comments subtly challenging her authority, testing her responses. "But doctor," he said at one point, those gold-flecked eyes boring into her. "How can we trust our own perceptions when reality itself might not be what we think it is? When the person sitting next to us might not be who they appear to be?" Her heart nearly stopped, but she kept her professional mask in place. "An interesting philosophical question, Mr. Rivers, but let's stay focused on practical coping strategies." After the session, he lingered as other patients filed out. "Doctor," he said softly, "have you seen Ilara Matthews recently? She missed our last few sessions." "Mrs. Matthews is in the secure ward," she replied carefully. "Her condition has deteriorated significantly." "Has it?" His smile was knife-sharp. How strange. She seemed to be improving so much lately. Once he was gone, Ilara sagged in her chair, trembling. She knew that look in his eyes. He was putting pieces together. And soon. The rest of the day passed in a blur of appointments and paperwork. She discovered that Dr. Anya kept detailed files on every patient, including her. Reading her own case file was surreal. Pages of notes about dissociative episodes, about trauma responses, about a tragedy involving a child that remained frustratingly vague. That evening, she begged off dinner again, telling Mark she had patient files to review. Instead, she drove to a small beach about an hour from the city. She needed to think, to plan her next steps. The beach was deserted in the growing darkness. Ilara walked along the water's edge, letting the cold waves lap at Dr. Anya's expensive shoes. Everything felt wrong in this body. Its movements, its responses, its very existence. This morning, in the shower, she had found stretch marks she didn't expect, scars she didn't recognize. The body felt heavier, less graceful than her own. Even simple things like writing were strange. The muscle memory was there, but but it produced Dr. Anya's elegant script instead of her own flowing hand. Her phone buzzed with texts from Mark, growing increasingly worried about her late nights. She should go home, should maintain the facade of normal family life. But the thought of lying next to him again, of feeling his hands on this borrowed flesh, made her nauseated. As she stood there in the darkness, waves washing away Dr. Anya's footprints, she realized she had simply traded one prison for another. Yes, she was free of Ravencrest, free of Caspian's dangerous love. But she was trapped in a life that wasn't hers, playing roles she never wanted: wife, mother, respected doctor. And somewhere in the secure ward of Ravencrest, her beautiful young body lay drugged and restrained, occupied by a woman who knew the truth about her past. While somewhere else in that gothic maze of a hospital, Caspian paced his room like a caged tiger, those incredible eyes burning with suspicion and dawning understanding. She stayed at the beach until the cold became unbearable, then drove back to the house she didn't consider home. Mark was waiting up, concern etched on his kind face. "Anya," he said, using the name that wasn't hers. "What's going on? You've been so distant lately." She let him pull her into an embrace, forced herself not to stiffen as he kissed her neck. His love for his wife was pure, uncomplicated. Everything Caspian's love wasn't. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like another form of chains. "Just tired," she murmured, using Dr. Anya's accent perfectly. "Let's go to bed." Later, lying awake beside him, she made her plans. Tomorrow she would search Dr. Anya's office more thoroughly. There had to be something there. Some file, some note, some key to unlocking her own past. She needed to understand why she had been in Ravencrest in the first place, what had happened to her son, why her memories were locked away. But as she finally drifted toward sleep, it wasn't her forgotten past that haunted her. It was Caspian's eyes during group therapy, the way they had studied her with growing suspicion. He had taught her everything she knew about body swapping. If anyone could figure out what she had done, it would be him. And when he did, God help her when he did.